I knew the campground was empty because I was the one who emptied it. That is the part people never understand when they hear this story. They think I got confused in the dark, or heard animals moving under canvas, or let my nerves turn wind into voices. But I checked every permit myself. I walked every loop. I watched the last truck pull through the exit gate with 2 bikes strapped to the back and a wet cooler bouncing in the bed. By 9:40 that night, Cedar Draw Campground had no registered guests, no late arrivals, no staff besides me, and no reason to make a sound. So when I reached Site 17 a little after midnight and heard someone breathing inside a closed tent, I did what any ranger would do. I called out, "Park service, is anyone in there?" The breathing stopped. Then, every tent in the campground started breathing at once. Not moving, not flapping, not collapsing in the wind. Breathing. Slow. Wet. Patient. Like whatever was inside each one had been holding its breath all night, waiting for me to notice. My name is Owen Rusk. I worked 3 seasons as a night ranger at Larkspur Lake Recreation Area, a small government-managed park tucked into the northern edge of the Rainvan Range. It was never famous. That was part of the appeal. No postcard waterfalls, no massive visitor center, no shuttle buses full of tourists in bright jackets. Just black spruce, old logging roads, 1 cold lake, 6 march trails, and a campground built in the 1970s when people still believed a flat patch of forest and a restroom block counted as luxury. Cedar Draw was the oldest campground in the park. 42 campsites arranged in 2 loops, with a narrow creek cutting behind the lower section and a service road that had not been properly graded in years. In summer, it filled with families, retirees, fly fishermen, and people who carried too much gear for a 2-night trip. By late October, it was mostly empty. That was when I liked it best. The trees had gone thin. The lake turned steel gray. At night, the whole place felt like it was listening to itself. I do not mean that poetically. Some forests are quiet because nothing is happening. Cedar Draw was quiet because everything waited until you passed. My job was simple. Patrol the campground after dark. Check permits. Lock the lake access gate. Keep drunk campers from feeding raccoons. Make sure nobody left fires burning in the rings. It was not heroic work. Most nights were just damp boots, bad coffee, and paperwork. But that fall, the campground started having electrical problems. Not dramatic ones. Just enough to annoy people. The restroom lights flickered. The water pump failed twice. The reservation kiosk printed blank slips at random. A motion light near the dumpster kept switching on when there was nothing beneath it. Then people began complaining about sounds. At first, it was easy to dismiss. A couple from Spokane said someone coughed outside their tent all night. An older man in Site 6 said he heard a woman whispering numbers behind the restroom. A group of college hikers packed out early because, according to one of them, the campground kept sighing. That was the word she used, sighing. I remember because I wrote it down on the incident form. Guest reports campground sighing. Likely wind through trees. My supervisor, Anita Hale, read the report the next morning, looked at me over her glasses and said, "Don't get cute in federal paperwork." I told her I was quoting the visitor. She did not smile. Anita was the kind of ranger who believed every strange complaint had a clean explanation if you walked far enough toward it. Loose flashing. A barred owl. A bear nosing a cooler. Teens from town sneaking in. She had worked parks for 28 years and had no patience for ghost stories. That was why, when she decided to close Cedar Draw for 3 days, I knew something else had happened. The public reason was seasonal maintenance. The real reason was Site 17. Site 17 sat near the back of the lower loop, close enough to the creek that you could hear water moving behind the tree line. It had a picnic table, a fire ring, a lantern pole, and a flat tent pad bordered by rotting railroad ties. Nothing special. But on October 18th, a man named Joel Perrin walked into the ranger station just before dusk and said his wife had not come back from the restroom. They had been staying in Site 17. His wife's name was Marin, 34 years old, school librarian, red rain jacket, gray knit cap. Diabetic, according to Joel, but stable. He said she left the tent at 6:10 to wash her hands and never returned. The restroom was less than 90 yards away. We treated it seriously, but not dramatically at first. People get turned around in campgrounds more often than you would think, especially at dusk, especially when every loop looks like the same trees repeated. I joined 2 other rangers and a county deputy. We checked the restroom, the creek bank, the road, the dumpsters, the empty sites, the tree line. Nothing. Then Joel started acting strange. Not grief strange. Not panic strange. Not panic strange. Listening strange. He kept turning toward their tent. When Anita asked him questions, he answered without looking at her. Finally, he said, "She's in there." Anita glanced at the tent. "In your tent?" Joel nodded. We had already checked it twice. I unzipped it myself the second time. Sleeping bags, 2 duffels, a paper bag folded face down, a bag of trail mix, 2 pairs of boots lined neatly by the door. No Marin, no hiding place. But Joel kept staring at the tent like he was watching someone move inside. He said, "She keeps taking breaths." Nobody spoke for a second. The deputy looked at me. I looked at Anita. Then, from inside the empty tent, we heard a woman inhale. I can still remember the exact sound. Not a gasp, not a moan, a sleeping breath. Soft and human and close enough that every hair on my neck lifted. Joel made a sound like he had been struck in the stomach. Anita stepped forward and unzipped the tent. There was nobody inside. The breath stopped the moment the zipper opened. We searched until 2 in the morning, then again at first light, then with dogs, then with county volunteers, then with a helicopter when the weather cleared. Marin Perrin was never found. The official report said she likely wandered beyond the campground, entered the creek corridor in low visibility, and became lost in dense terrain. That explanation was possible. It was not convincing. The dog team lost her scent at the entrance of the tent, not near the restroom, not at the creek, not on the road, at the tent, as if Marin had stepped into it and gone nowhere else. 3 days later, Joel came back to collect their belongings. I was on duty when he arrived. He looked like he had aged 10 years in a weekend. His face had that flat, sleepless quality people get after the search teams leave and the world starts expecting them to accept words like probable and likely. I helped him fold the tent. He was quiet the whole time. But when we lifted it from the ground, he froze. Underneath the tent, pressed into the damp dirt, was the shape of a person lying on their side. Not a footprint. Not a body. An impression. Like someone had slept beneath the tent all night, between the fabric floor and the earth. Joel stared at it. Then he whispered, "That's how she sleeps." I did not know what to say. There are moments in this job where training gives you a sentence, and there are moments where it gives you nothing at all. That was one of the second kind. We closed Site 17 after that, quietly. No sign, no announcement. The reservation system just stopped offering it, but Cedar Draw stayed open. Because parks do that, they absorb tragedies. They rename them maintenance issues. They let new people build fires 20 feet from where old people vanished. A place can lose someone on Monday and host a birthday party on Saturday. The forest does not pause. The campground reopened with Site 17 blocked off by 2 orange cones and a laminated notice that said temporarily unavailable. Nobody asked much about it. People rarely do, as long as their own site is ready. Then the breathing complaint started again. Not every night, not always from Site 17. Site 3 reported breathing behind their cooler. Site 22 said someone slept under their picnic table. Site 9 said their tent walls moved in and out all night even though there was no wind. Each time, we found nothing. No tracks, no damage, no animals, no pranksters. Just campers with pale faces and half-packed gear, wanting refunds and refusing to say the word they were all thinking. By the last week of October, Anita decided Cedar Draw needed to close for the season early. That should have been the end of it. On October 27th, I was assigned the closing patrol. The instructions were routine. Confirm all campers had vacated. Check each site for trash. Lock the restroom. Shut off water. Put the entrance chain up. Drop the printed closure notice at the kiosk. There were only 5 occupied sites that afternoon. A retired couple in Site 4. 2 climbers in Site 11. A man traveling alone in Site 26. And 3 friends in Site 31 with the tarp set up so complicated it looked like they were trying to build a chapel. By 8:30, everyone had left except the 3 friends. They were slow, irritated, and drunk enough to think policy was personal. One of them kept saying, "We paid for 2 nights." I said, "You'll be refunded for the second." He said, "By who? The trees?" His friend laughed too hard. I remember that because a few hours later, when I walked past Site 31 and heard breathing inside their collapsed tent bag, I thought of him laughing. At 9:40, they finally pulled away. I stood by the entrance kiosk and watched their taillights disappear between the pines. Then I did the boring part of the job. I drove Loubet, checked fire rings, picked up beer cans, noted 1 broken lantern hook, removed a bag of trash from Site 8 that had already attracted raccoons. Then I drove Loop B. The lower loop always felt colder. Maybe because of the creek. Maybe because the trees were denser. Maybe because I already knew too much about Site 17. At 10:25, I parked near the restroom and walked the rest on foot. I had a headlamp, a radio, a flashlight, and a clipboard sealed in a plastic sleeve because it had been raining on and off all day. The campground was empty. No cars, no voices, no fires, no tents. At least, that is what I thought at first. When I reached Site 14, I noticed a tent, small, dark green, dome style, 2-person. It sat perfectly centered on the tent pad. For a few seconds, I just stared at it, annoyed more than afraid. People forget things. It happens. They drive off with the cooler and leave behind a $300 tent because they packed in the dark and assumed someone else grabbed it. I checked my clipboard. Site 14 had been empty all week. No reservation. No walk-up. No permit slip on the post. I radioed dispatch. "Central, this is Ranger Rusk at Cedar Draw. I've got an abandoned tent on Site 14. Can you confirm no active permit?" Static. Then Kim, our night dispatcher, came back. Confirmed. Cedar Draw shows empty. Copy. I'm going to check for property. I approached the tent. The rain had made the fabric shine under my flashlight. No mud splashes. No pine needles. No sagging water pockets. It looked freshly pitched. Too freshly. The stakes were set deep. Guy lines tight. Door zipped. I called out, "Park service. Anyone inside?" Nothing. I waited. Then I heard it. 1 breath. Slow inhale. A pause. Slow inhale. A pause. Slow exhale. My first thought was that someone was sleeping inside. My second thought was Marin Perrin. I stepped back. "Central," I said, trying to keep my voice normal. "Possible occupant in abandoned tent. Site 14. Kim replied, "Do you need county?" "Stand by." I said it because I did not want to be the ranger who called deputies for a sleeping camper. I also said it because some part of me already knew that if I unzipped that tent, the breathing would stop. I called out again. "Hello. Park service. The campground is closed. You need to wake up." The breathing continued. Even. Calm. I crouched and aimed my light at the lower edge of the tent. No shadow moved inside. No weight pressed the floor. No shoes outside. No backpack. No cooler. No smell of food, sweat, smoke, or wet clothing. Just that breath. I reached for the zipper. Before I touched it, The breathing stopped. That was worse. Silence can be louder than sound when you know something chose it. I unzipped the tent. Empty. Of course it was empty. The beam of my flashlight swept across a clean nylon floor. No sleeping bag, no pad, no belongings. Nothing but a few drops of condensation trembling on the inside wall. I held the flap open for nearly 10 seconds. Then I heard breathing behind me. I turned so fast my headlamp strap slipped down over one eye. There was another tent in Site 15. Blue. Larger. 4-person. It had not been there when I walked past. I know it had not been there. There are details your mind can invent, and there are details your body remembers. My body remembered Site 15 being empty because I had stepped over a fallen branch at the edge of its pad. Now the branch was under a tent, not moved aside. Under it, the tent floor bulged slightly where the branch crossed beneath, and inside, someone was breathing. I backed into the road. My radio clicked. Kim said, "Rusk, status?" I lifted it to my mouth and realized I had been holding my breath too. "Central, I need you to check the gate camera." "What am I looking for?" "Any vehicles entering Cedar Draw after 2140. A pause. Then, negative. "No vehicles after the last camper exit." "Any pedestrians?" "Negative." I turned slowly. Site 16 had a tent now. Then Site 18. Then Site 19. They did not appear with a flash or a sound. They were simply present each time my light moved away and came back. Dark shapes on the pads. Domes. A-frames. Old canvas ridge tents. Cheap orange backpacking tents. Family tents with screened porches. Every empty campsite filling itself with shelter. Every shelter breathing. I did not run. People think fear makes you run. Real fear often does the opposite. It makes you careful, because some animal part of your brain understands that sudden movement might make whatever is watching you stop pretending it is not. I stepped backward down the road, keeping my flashlight low. Breathing came from both sides now. Not synchronized at first. Some slow, some shallow, some rattling, some almost childlike, though I tried not to think that word. Then, as I reached the curve near Site 21, the breaths began to match. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. The campground was learning one rhythm. My radio hissed. Anita's voice came through. She was not supposed to be on duty. "Rusk, where are you?" I nearly dropped the radio. "Lower loop," I said. "Did Kim call you?" "No. I heard traffic." That was impossible. Anita lived 20 minutes outside the park and did not monitor the night channel unless she was called. I said, "You need to get here." She did not answer right away. In the silence, all those tents breathed. Then Anita said, very quietly, "Are they up?" My hand tightened around the radio. "What?" "The tents," she said. "Are they up?" I looked at the rows of shapes crowding the dark pads. My mouth went dry. "You knew about this?" Another pause. Then she said, "Get out of the lower loop. Do not open another one." The breathing stopped, all at once. Not faded, not interrupted, stopped. The whole campground became silent in the exact moment Anita said that. I whispered, "Why?" Anita said, "Because they count openings." A zipper moved somewhere behind me. Not all the way. Just enough to make that soft, insect-like sound nylon makes when teeth separate in the dark. I turned. Site 17. The closed site. The orange cones were gone. A tent stood on the pad. I had seen dozens of tents by then, but this one was different. It was old canvas, army green, tall enough for a person to stand inside. Rain darkened the roof. The front flap hung loose, tied from within by a cord that swayed slightly though there was no wind. I knew, without knowing how I knew, that this was the tent the campground wanted me to open. The flap moved another inch. From inside, a woman took one breath. Then she said my name. Not loudly, not dramatically, just the way a tired person might say it from another room. "Owen." I ran. I ran up the lower loop road with my flashlight bouncing uselessly and my boots sliding on wet leaves. The tents on either side did not move, but I felt them turning toward me in a way I cannot defend. You can feel attention. Anyone who has worked alone at night knows that. The back of your neck knows before your eyes do. By the time I reached the restroom, I was gasping hard enough to hurt. The restroom lights were on. They had been shut off at the breaker earlier that afternoon. Both doors stood open. Inside the women's side, a hand dryer started by itself. The sound ripped through the campground, loud and mechanical and wrong. Then the men's side answered with another dryer. Then a sink. Then a toilet flushed. Then all of them at once, running and roaring and flushing and blowing as if the restroom was pretending to be full of people. My radio crackled with Anita's voice. "Do not go inside." "I'm not," I snapped. "Good. Listen to me. Stay on the road. Do not step onto any tent pad. Do not answer voices from inside the tents. Do not unzip anything else." "That sounds like a list of things you should have told me before tonight." Her voice hardened. "Move, Owen." Behind me, the tents resumed breathing. But now the rhythm was faster, like excitement. I reached the truck at 12:38. I know the exact time because the dash clock glowed when I yanked the door open. The engine turned over once, then died. I tried again. Nothing. I tried a third time and every light on the dashboard flashed before going black. I sat there gripping the wheel, rain ticking softly on the roof, breath clouding the windshield. Then something breathed from the back seat. I opened the door and fell out of the truck. There was nothing in the back seat. Of course there was nothing. That had become the worst kind of answer. The campground entrance was half a mile away. Uphill. Past the kiosk. Past the gate. Past the chain. I could walk it. I told myself that. Half a mile is nothing. Rangers walk more than that before breakfast. But the road out of Cedar Draw runs between the two loops for the first few hundred yards. Even if I did not look, I would pass them. All those tents, all those lungs. Anita's truck came through the entrance at 12:51. I saw her headlights crest the hill and nearly cried from relief. She stopped 50 yards short of me, got out, and did not slam the door. That detail scared me. Anita always slammed doors. She moved like the world had better get out of the way. That night, she closed the truck door with 2 fingers. She carried no flashlight, only an old kerosene lantern I had never seen before. The flame inside it burned low and yellow. "Walk toward me," she called. I did. Behind me, from the campground, a tent zipper opened all the way. I froze. Anita raised the lantern. "Do not turn around." It opened. I heard it. "There's someone behind me." "No," she said. "There is something that knows behind is where people are weakest." I started walking again. The breathing swelled. Not just from the campground now. From the ditch. From under the road. From the tree line. The whole lower draw seemed to inhale. "Owen." Mirren's voice called again. Closer this time. I kept walking. Then another voice spoke from my left. My father's voice. That was the moment I almost broke. He had been dead for 6 years. Heart attack in a hardware store parking lot. No warning. No goodbye. And there he was, somewhere beyond the trees, saying the sentence he used to say whenever I left home in bad weather. "Drive slow, kiddo." I stopped. Anita saw it. Her face changed. Not fear. Recognition. She said, "That one yours?" I nodded once. "Keep it that way," she said. "If you answer, it won't stay yours." I do not know why that sentence worked, but it did. Maybe because grief wants contact more than truth. Maybe because some part of me understood that whatever spoke with my father's voice had stolen the shape of care without understanding it. My father would never have called from the dark to keep me there. I walked to Anita. When I reached her truck, she handed me the lantern. "Hold this." My hands were shaking so badly the flame trembled. She walked past me toward my dead truck. What are you doing? Getting the closure binder. Leave it. No. Anita. She turned just enough for me to see her face. Paper matters in places like this. I thought she had lost her mind. Then she opened my passenger door, leaned in, and took the campground closure binder from the seat. The moment she did, every tent in Cedar Draw exhaled. The sound rolled through the trees like a crowd disappointed by the same thing. Anita came back fast, but did not run. She got in her truck and said, "Move." I climbed into the passenger seat with the lantern in my lap. She reversed all the way to the entrance without turning the truck around. The tents briefed behind us. At the gate, she stopped, got out, and locked the chain by hand. Then she hung the lantern from the gatepost. "Why leave it?" I asked. She did not answer until we were back on the main park road. Then she said, "So they remember where the boundary is." I did not speak for a long time after that. Neither did she. Rain dragged across the windshield in thin, shining lines. The pines leaned over the road. The heater blew cold air against my knees. Finally, I said, "How long have you known?" Anita kept her eyes forward. "Longer than I wanted to?" "That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting tonight." I laughed once. It came out wrong. Marin Perrin? Her jaw tightened. Marin was not the first. I turned toward her. The dashboard light made the lines in her face deeper. She looked suddenly much older than she did in daylight. "Cedar Draw used to be called Lower Breach Camp," she said, "before the park took it over. Private timberland before that. Before that, seasonal hunting camps. Before that, nobody built there twice." "Why?" "Because the ground keeps what rests on it too long." I stared at her. "That means nothing." "I know." "Anita." She pulled into the staff lot behind the ranger office and parked. For a moment, the only sound was the engine ticking. Then she took the closure binder from between us and opened it. Inside were the normal forms: site inspection sheets, utility shutoff checklist, seasonal closure map. She flipped past all of them to a plastic sleeve in the back. Inside was a photocopy of an older map. Cedar Draw looked different on it. Fewer sites, no restroom, no paved loop, and in the lower section, where Site 17 now stood, someone had drawn a black circle. Beside it, in faded handwriting, were 3 words: "Do not canvass." I read it twice. "What does that mean?" Anita took the page back. In the old camps, canvas meant shelter. Tents, tarps, bedroll covers, anything stretched between a person and the night. "That doesn't answer me." "No," she said. "It doesn't." She closed the binder. "I need you to write your incident report before you sleep." I looked at her. "Are you serious?" "Very." "What am I supposed to write?" "That tents appeared from nowhere and breathed." "You write what happened. And then I mark it as restricted, and tomorrow we close Cedar Draw permanently." I wanted to believe her. That was the cruelest part. I wanted to believe there was an adult in charge, a process, a file, a locked drawer where impossible things went and became manageable. But when we walked into the ranger office, Kim was standing beside the dispatch desk with tears on her face. She pointed at the printer. It was running. Not fast, not jammed. Just printing one sheet every few seconds. Reservation slips. Cedar Draw Campground. Site 1. Site 2. Site 3. Each slip had the same arrival date, October 27th. That night, each slip had the same guest name, Marin Perrin. Kim whispered, "It started right after you left the gate." Anita grabbed the stack and tore it from the tray. The printer continued. Site 14. Site 15. Site 16. Site 17 printed. The lights went out. Emergency backup clicked on a second later, bathing the room in red. Nobody moved. The printer kept going in the dark. Chunk. Whir. Chunk. Whir. I had never thought of an office printer as a frightening sound before. Now I still hate hearing one run after hours. Anita stepped forward and ripped the power cord from the wall. The printer stopped. Then the radio on the dispatch desk clicked on. Not our handhelds. Not the main unit. The old base radio in the corner. The one we kept because nobody had bothered to remove it after the system upgrade. Static filled the room. Then breathing. One slow inhale. One slow exhale. Kim started crying harder. Anita crossed the room and turned the volume knob down. The breathing did not get quieter. It came through the walls, through the vents, through the floor beneath us. The ranger office itself took a breath. That was when I understood Cedar Draw was not contained by the gate. Maybe it never had been. Maybe the gate and lantern and paperwork were not barriers. Maybe they were manners, old gestures, ways of telling something ancient and patient that we still remembered how to be polite. Anita told Kim to leave. Kim did not argue. She took her coat and keys and walked out with both hands pressed over her ears. I stayed because Anita told me to, or maybe because I did not want to be alone in the parking lot. We spent the next hour doing the strangest paperwork of my life. Anita wrote a closure order by hand, not on the computer, not on official letterhead, on thick yellow field paper from a drawer I had never seen her open before. She wrote slowly, pressing so hard the pen nearly tore the page. Cedar Draw Campground is closed to overnight shelter, canvas use, temporary habitation, and recreational occupancy until further notice. Then she made me sign as witness. Why canvas use? I asked. Because words matter. You keep saying that. Because people don't listen the first time. At 2019, the breathing stopped. All of it. Office, radio, walls, vents. The sudden absence made my ears ring. Anita closed her eyes. Now it's listening, she said. 3 knocks sounded from the front door. Not loud, not aggressive, just polite. Anita opened her eyes. No matter what you hear, you do not open that door. The knocks came again, then a voice. Kim's voice. I forgot my bag. I looked at the dispatch desk. Kim's bag was still there, hanging on the chair. Anita shook her head once. The voice outside said, Anita, please, it's cold. Anita did not move. The voice changed, not dramatically. It simply became older. A man's voice now. Weak. Familiar to Anita in a way I could see before she said anything. Her mouth parted. I whispered, That one yours? For a second, I thought she might answer it. Her hand twitched toward the door. Then she stepped back and sat down hard in the nearest chair. My brother, she said. The voice outside the door said, Annie. I had never heard anyone call her that. Anita put both hands over her face. The voice said, I found a place to sleep. The room seemed to tilt. A memory moved through her without being spoken. I could see it happen. The old pain, the old bargaining. The part of a person that never stopped standing at the last place someone was seen. I understood then that nobody in parks is clean of loss. Not rangers, not supervisors, not dispatchers. We work around absence so often that we start thinking we are immune to it. We are not, we are just easier to call by name. The voice outside knocked a third time. Anita lowered her hands. Her face was wet, but her eyes were steady. My brother hated camping, she said. Then she stood, walked to the old base radio and pulled the entire unit off the shelf. It crashed onto the floor. Plastic cracked. Static screamed, then died. The knocking stopped. Dawn came slowly. Gray first, then silver through the office blinds. No birds. That was what I remember most about the morning after. Not the fear. Not the printer slips. Not Anita's face when she heard her brother. The silence outside. A park morning should have birds in it, even in late October, especially after rain. But the world beyond the ranger office was quiet in the way a room is quiet after someone has been holding a secret too long. At 7:10, maintenance arrived. By 8:00, Anita had a crew at Cedar Draw. I went too, though every part of me wanted to quit before anyone could ask me to return. The entrance gate was still locked. The lantern still hung from the post. It had burned out, but the glass was warm. Inside the campground, there were no tents. None. The roads were wet and empty. The fire rings cold. The pads bare. If I had been alone, I might have convinced myself the whole thing had been some kind of stress episode. But Anita saw my face and said, "Don't do that to yourself." At Site 14, where I had opened the first tent, the ground was dark. Not wet dark. Pressed dark. A rectangular patch marked the exact footprint of the tent. The soil inside it was lower than the soil around it, as if something heavy had rested there for months. Site 15 was the same. So was 16. So was every site in the lower loop. 42 tent impressions. Every campsite. Even the ones that had been empty all season. Even Site 17. Especially Site 17. Maintenance Chief Ron Voss walked the loop with us. He was a quiet man with a tobacco-stained beard and one artificial knee. He did not ask many questions. At Site 17, he crouched by the impression and touched the dirt with 2 fingers. Then he said, "It's warm." Anita told him to mark the area and keep the crew off the pads. Ron stood. "Close it. Permanently." He nodded like he had been waiting for that answer for years. By noon, the park issued a public closure notice citing infrastructure failure, drainage instability, and winter storm preparation. All true enough to be useful, none true enough to matter. Over the next week, Cedar Draw was stripped. Fire rings removed. Picnic tables hauled out. Permit posts pulled. Restroom locked and later demolished. Road blocked with concrete barriers. Site 17 was not dug up. I asked Anita why. She said, "Because excavation is another kind of opening." I did not ask again. The official campground map changed. Cedar Draw became an unmarked green area labeled Restoration Zone. Visitors stopped asking about it faster than I expected. People accept missing places more easily than missing people. Give them a new campground with level pads and better bathrooms, and most will never wonder why the old road is blocked. But staff wondered. Of course we did. Stories spread in the quiet way staff stories do. Not openly. Not around interns. Not where volunteers could hear. A mechanic claimed the old restroom foundations sweated in winter. A trail worker said he saw tent stakes pushing up through the soil after a hard rain. Kim transferred to a state park near the coast and never worked night dispatch again. Anita stayed 2 more months. Then she retired early. No speech. No cake. No announcement beyond an email from regional office thanking her for her years of service. On her last day, she left a sealed envelope in my locker. Inside was the old photocopied map with the black circle. Under "Do Not Canvas," she had written one more line in blue pen. "It does not want bodies. It wants shelter." I carried that sentence around for years without understanding it. Maybe I still do not. I left Larkspur Lake the following spring. I told people it was for better pay. That was partly true. I took a job inspecting watershed easements for the county. Daylight work. Fences, culverts, survey flags, no campgrounds, no tents. For a while, I got better. I slept through nights again. I stopped checking every dark window for nylon movement. I even went camping once with a woman I was dating. We used the cabin. I told her I had knee trouble and did not like sleeping on the ground. That was easier than telling the truth. The truth is that I cannot hear fabric shift in the dark without feeling my throat close. I cannot walk past a sporting goods store display of tents without looking for the slow rise and fall of walls. And I never, ever unzip anything without speaking first. 3 years after Cedar Draw closed, I received a package with no return address. It came to my county office, not my home. Inside was a campground permit slip, old thermal paper, faded print. Torn edge, Cedar Draw Campground. Site 17. Arrival date, October 27th. Guest name, Owen Rusk. At the bottom, where the system usually printed vehicle information, were 4 words: shelter, confirmed. OCCU pen absent. I drove back to Larkspur Lake that same afternoon. I do not know what I expected. Maybe I wanted to prove somebody was messing with me. Maybe I wanted to show the slip to whoever had Anita's old job and demand an explanation. Maybe some part of me had been waiting to be called back. The park looked smaller than I remembered. Places do that when they survive your fear. The visitor center had new siding. The entrance sign had been repainted. There was a new electric vehicle charger in the staff lot. I asked for the superintendent. A young man at the desk told me she was in a meeting. I asked about Cedar Draw. He smiled politely and said, "I don't think we have a Cedar Draw." That was the first bad sign. I said it used to be a campground. He typed something into the computer. "No campground by that name in our system. Check old records." He gave me the look front desk staff give difficult visitors. "Sir, I can ask someone," but I left before he finished. The old road was still there if you knew where to look. They had planted shrubs near the entrance, and the concrete barriers were covered in moss. The chain gate was gone. So was the kiosk, but the grade of the road remained, dipping between black spruce and alder, leading down toward the creek. I stood at the top for a long time. It was late afternoon, warm for October. Sunlight moved through the trees in soft, broken sheets. Nothing about it looked haunted. That made it worse. Fear is easiest when the world agrees with you, when a place looks beautiful, when birds sing and insects rise gold in the light. You begin to doubt the worst thing that ever happened to you. You start thinking maybe trauma has edited your memory. Maybe canvas breathes because wind moved through wet seams. Maybe voices came from radios and grief. Maybe official maps forget places all the time. Then I saw the tent. It stood about 50 yards down the old road. Small. Dark green. Two-person. Site 14's tent, or something wearing its shape. I did not move. The tent sat in a patch of sunlight. Doors zipped. Guy lines tight though no stakes were visible. For several seconds, it did nothing. Then the front wall expanded slightly. Inhale. The fabric sank. Exhale. Behind it, deeper down the road, another tent took shape between the trees. Then another. Not appearing. Arriving. As if the forest had been full of them all along and my attention was the only thing that made them visible. I stepped back. A twig cracked behind me. I turned. Anita Hale stood at the edge of the road. She looked older, thinner, and not surprised to see me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "You got a slip." I nodded. "How?" "They do that sometimes." "Who are they?" She looked down the old road. The tents breathed quietly in the sun. "I don't know if they're a who." "Then what?" She took a slow breath of her own. Some places don't understand the difference between keeping people safe and keeping people. I wanted to be angry at her. For not telling me. For knowing. For leaving. For appearing like a ghost in a place that had already taken enough from me. Instead, I said, "Why my name?" "Because you opened one." I closed my eyes. Site 14, the zipper, the empty floor, the breath behind me. "They count openings," I said. Anita nodded. "Every opening is an invitation?" "No," she said. "A promise." "That makes no sense." "It doesn't need to. It just needs to be old." We stood there while the tents breathed. I asked her if Marin Perrin was inside them. Anita did not answer quickly. That was answer enough. "Not the way Joel wanted," she said finally. "What does that mean?" "It means people leave impressions. On rooms, on beds, on chairs. On the ground they sleep on. Most places let those impressions fade. And this place doesn't. No." A breeze moved through the road. The tent nearest us shivered. From inside, my father's voice said, "Drive slow, kiddo." I did not flinch that time. It still hurt. But it did not own me. Anita stepped closer and handed me something. A box of matches. Old. Damp at the edges. The striker worn nearly smooth. "Burn them?" I asked. She shook her head. "Light the lantern." I looked around. What lantern? I looked around. What lantern? She pointed to the old gate post. I had not noticed it before because the gate itself was gone, but the post remained, half swallowed by brush. Hanging from a rusted hook was the kerosene lantern, the same one she had left at the gate the night Cedar Draw closed. Its glass was dirty, its metal frame rusted. The fuel inside should have been long evaporated. I walked to it anyway. My hands shook as I struck the first match. It failed. The second broke. The third lit. The small flame leaned in the still air, blue at the base, yellow at the tip. When I touched it to the lantern wick, the lantern caught immediately. Down the old road, every tent stopped breathing. Anita exhaled beside me. "Now leave," she said. "What about this slip? It got you here. It doesn't get to keep you." I looked at the tents. In the silence, they seemed less like shelters and more like mouths held closed. "What happens if someone camps here?" Anita's expression hardened. "That's why I come back." "How often?" "When I feel it starting to forget." I looked at her then and understood something I wish I had not. She had not retired. Not really. She had simply changed jobs without paperwork. From ranger to witness. From supervisor to boundary marker. From employee to someone who came back with matches and memory, reminding a hungry place that it had once been named, closed, and refused. I asked if she wanted help. She smiled a little. It was the saddest smile I had ever seen. "You have a life, Owen. So did you." "No," she said. "I had a brother." The trees creaked. Far down the road, a tent zipper moved half an inch. Anita lifted her head. "Go." I did. I wish I could tell you I stayed. That I helped. That I became brave in the way stories want people to become brave near the end. But I left. I walked backward until the road disappeared behind brush. Then I returned to my truck and drove without stopping until I reached the county line. In my rearview mirror, for just a moment, I thought I saw a line of tents along the shoulder behind me. Then headlights passed, and they were gone. Anita Hill died the following winter. At least, that is what I was told. The email came from a former park employee who said she had been found in her home after a neighbor noticed newspapers piling up. Natural causes. Peaceful. No suspicious circumstances. I wanted to believe that. Then, 2 weeks after her funeral, Larkspur Lake announced a new primitive camping initiative funded by a regional outdoor access grant. The notice said the park would be adding dispersed tent sites and several restoration areas. One of the listed areas was Cedar Draw. I called the park office so fast I misdialed twice. The same young man answered, or someone who sounded like him. I asked to speak to the superintendent. Unavailable. I asked who approved camping in Cedar Draw. He paused. "I'm sorry, sir, can you repeat the area?" "Cedar Draw." Another pause. "We don't have anything by that name." "It's in your public notice." "I'm looking at the notice now," he said. "I don't see that." I opened the announcement on my computer while he was still on the phone. The words were gone, not changed. Gone. The bullet point now skipped from East Meadow to Ridge Spur with no mention of Cedar Draw at all. I hung up. That night, I dreamed of rain on canvas. Not a nightmare exactly. There was no monster, no chase, no screaming, just the sound of a campground sleeping. 42 tents in the dark, each one breathing in a different voice. When I woke, there was dirt on my bedroom floor. A small amount, damp, dark. Pressed into it was the corner shape of a tent stake. I have not been back to Larkspur Lake since. But last October, I checked the reservation system. I do not know why. Maybe fear becomes a ritual if you keep it long enough. Cedar Draw was not listed, of course. No map showed it. No campground index. No old brochure archive. Nothing. Then, at 2014 in the morning, my browser refreshed by itself. For less than 10 seconds, a new campground appeared on the booking page. No photo, no description, just one available site. Site 17. The arrival date was already selected. My birthday. The guest name field was already filled in, not with my name, with my father's. I shut the laptop so hard the hinge cracked. I sat in the dark until sunrise with every light in the house on. Maybe that sounds irrational. Maybe it is. But I know what people say when they hear stories like this. They say they would investigate. They would record it. They would bring cameras. They would expose the truth. No, they would not. Not if they heard a dead person use the voice that loved them best. Not if they stood in an empty campground and listened to every tent breathe. Because the worst part is not believing something impossible is happening. The worst part is realizing it knows exactly what shape your loneliness takes. So if you ever drive into a campground after dark and find it emptier than it should be, pay attention. If there are no cars, no fires, no voices, but the tents are already standing, do not call out. Do not unzip anything. Do not answer if someone inside says your name. And if the tent walls begin to rise and fall like lungs, leave before the campground learns how you breathe.